The Double Chamber by Charles Baudelaire. A chamber that is like a reverie, a chamber truly spiritual, where the stagnant atmosphere is lightly touched with rose and blue. There the soul bathes itself in indolence made odorous with regret and desire. There is some sense of the twilight, of things tinged with blue and rose, a dream of delight during an eclipse. The shape of the furniture is elongated, low, languishing. One would think it endowed with the somnambulistic vitality of plants and minerals. The tapestries speak an inarticulate language like the flowers, the skies, the dropping suns. There are no artistic abominations upon the walls. Compared with the pure dream, with an impression unanalyzed, definite art, positive art, is a blasphemy. Here all has the sufficing lucidity and the delicious obscurity of music. An infinitesimal odor of the most exquisite choice, mingled with a floating humidity, swims in this atmosphere where the drowsing spirit is lulled by the sensations one feels in a hothouse. The abundant muslin flows before the windows and the couch and spreads out in snowy cascades. Upon the couch lies the idol, ruler of my dreams. But why is she here? Who has brought her? What magical power has installed her upon the throne of delight and reverie? What matter she is there, and I recognize her? These indeed are the eyes whose flame pierces the twilight, the subtle and terrible mirrors that I recognize by their horrifying malice. They attract, they dominate, they devour the sight of whomsoever is imprudent enough to look at them. I have often studied them, these black stars that compel curiosity and admiration. To what benevolent demon, then, do I owe being thus surrounded with mystery, with silence, with peace and sweet odors? O beatitude! The thing we name life, even in its most fortunate amplitude, has nothing in common with this supreme life with which I am now acquainted, which I taste minute by minute, second by second. Not so. Minutes are no more, seconds are no more. Time has vanished, and eternity reigns an eternity of delight. A heavy and terrible knocking reverberates upon the door, and, as in a hellish dream, it seems to me as though I have received a blow from a mattock. Then a spectre enters. It is an usher who comes to torture me in the name of the law, an infamous concubine who comes to cry misery and to add the trivialities of her life to the sorrow of mine. Or it may be the errand boy of an editor who comes to implore the remainder of a manuscript. The chamber of paradise, the idol, the ruler of dreams, the slified, as the great René said, all this magic has vanished at the brutal knocking of the spectre. Horror, I remember. Yes, this kennel, this habitation of eternal weariness is indeed my own. Here is my senseless furniture, dusty and tattered, the dirty fireplace without a name or an ember, the sad windows where the raindrops have traced runnels in the dust, the manuscripts erased or unfinished, the almanac, the sinister days marked off with a pencil. And this perfume of another world, where have I intoxicated myself with so perfected sensitiveness? Alas, its place is taken by an odor of stale tobacco smoke, mingled with I know not what nauseating mustiness. Now one breathes here the rankness of desolation. In this narrow world, narrow and yet full of disgust, a single familiar object smiles at me, the phial of laudanum, old and terrible love, like all loves, alas, fruitful in caresses and treacheries. Yes, time has reappeared. Time reigns a monarch now, and with the hideous ancient has returned all his demoniacal following of memories, regrets, tremors, fears, dolors, nightmares, and twittering nerves. I assure you that the seconds are strongly and solemnly accentuated now, and each, as it drips from the pendulum, says, I am life, intolerable, implacable life. There is not a second in mortal life whose mission it is to bear good news, the good news that brings the inexplicable tear to the eye. Yes, time reigns. Time has regained his brutal mastery, and he goads me as though I were a steer, with his double goad. Woe, thou fool! Sweat then, thou slave! Live on, thou damned.
Une chambre qui ressemble à une rêverie, une chambre véritablement spirituelle, où une atmosphère stagnante est légèrement teintée de rose et de bleu. L'âme y prend un bain de paresse, aromatisé par le regret et le désir. C'est quelque chose de crépusculaire, de bleuâtre et de rosâtre, un rêve de volupté pendant une éclipse. Les meubles ont des formes allongées, prostrées, alanguies. Les meubles ont l'air de rêver. On les dirait doués d'une vie somnambulique, comme le végétal et le minéral. Les étoffes parlent une langue muette, comme les fleurs, comme les ciels, comme les soleils couchants. Sur les murs, nulle abomination artistique. Relativement au rêve pur, à l'impression non analysée, l'art défini, l'art positif est un blasphème. Ici, tout a la suffisante clarté et la délicieuse obscurité de l'harmonie. Une senteur infinitésimale du choix le plus exquis, à laquelle se mène une très légère humidité, nage dans cette atmosphère où l'esprit sommeillant est bercé par des sensations de serre chaude. La mousseline pleut abondamment devant les fenêtres et devant le lit. Elle s'épanche en cascades neigeuses. Sur ce lit est couchée l'idole, la souveraine des rêves. Mais comment est-elle ici? Qui l'a amenée? Quel pouvoir magique l'a installée sur ce trône de rêverie et de volupté? Qu'importe, la voilà, je la reconnais. Voilà bien ses yeux dont la flamme traverse le crépuscule, ces subtiles et terribles mirettes que je reconnais à leur effrayante malice. Elles attirent, elles subjuguent, elles dévorent le regard de l'imprudent qui les contemple. Je les ai souvent étudiées, ces étoiles noires qui commandent la curiosité et l'admiration. À quel démon bienveillant dois-je être ainsi entouré de mystères, de silence, de paix et de parfum? Ô béatitude! Ce que nous nommons généralement la vie, même dans son expansion la plus heureuse, n'a rien de commun avec cette vie suprême dont j'ai maintenant connaissance et que je savoure minute par minute, seconde par seconde. Non, il n'est plus de minute, il n'est plus de seconde, le temps a disparu, c'est l'éternité qui règne, une éternité de délices. Mais un coup terrible, lourd, a retenti à la porte. Et comme dans les rêves infernaux, il m'a semblé que je recevais un coup de pioche dans l'estomac. Et puis un spectre est entré. C'est un huissier qui vient me torturer au nom de la loi. Une infâme concubine qui vient crier misère et ajouter les trivialités de sa vie aux douleurs de la mienne. Ou bien le sot de ruisseau d'un directeur de journal qui réclame la suite du manuscrit. La chambre paradisiaque, l'idole, la souveraine des rêves, la sylphide, comme disait le grand René. Toute cette magie a disparu au coup brutal frappé par le spectre. Horreur! Je me souviens, oui, ce taudis, ce séjour de l'éternel ennui est bien le mien. Voici les meubles sots, poudreux, écornés, la cheminée sans flamme et sans braise, souillée de crachats, les tristes fenêtres où la pluie a tracé des sillons dans la poussière, les manuscrits raturés ou incomplets, l'almanach où le crayon a marqué les dates sinistres. Et ce parfum d'un autre monde dont je m'enivrais avec une sensibilité perfectionnée. Hélas, Il est remplacé par une fétide odeur de tabac, mêlée à je ne sais quelle nauséabonde moisissure. On respire ici maintenant le ranci de la désolation. Dans ce monde étroit, mais si plein de dégoût, un seul objet connu me sourit. La fiole de laudanum, une vieille et terrible amie, comme toutes les amies, hélas, féconde en caresses et en traîtrises. Oh oui, le temps a reparu, le temps règne en souverain maintenant, et avec le hideux vieillard est revenu tout son démoniaque cortège de souvenirs, de regrets, de spasmes, de peurs, d'angoisses, de cauchemars, de colère et de névrose. Je vous assure que les secondes maintenant sont fortement et solennellement accentuées, et chacune, en jaillissant de la pendule, dit « Je suis la vie, l'insupportable, l'implacable vie. » Il n'y a qu'une seconde dans la vie humaine qui ait mission d'annoncer une bonne nouvelle, la bonne nouvelle qui cause à chacun une inexplicable peur. Oui, le temps règne. Il a repris sa brutale dictature. Et il me pousse comme si j'étais un bœuf avec son double aiguillon. Hu donc, bourrique, su donc, esclave, vis donc, damné.
Hello, everyone. This is Luke Johnson from Noetic, the humanities teaching app and social platform. Today, I am joined by Sophie Corre and Bob Schut. We are going to be discussing Charles Baudelaire again. Specifically, we're going to be discussing The Double Chamber, one of his longer prose poems. Maybe we should say something first. I mean, I'm going to edit this afterwards. About these recitations that we just did. I recited it, and then Sophie recited it, which was an incredibly elegant recitation. I love it when Sophie reads these in French. Why do you guys maybe want to say something about why you were sort of initially drawn to this poem? I know I suggested it. I just love the words and how it all sort of coagulated. I didn't really understand any of the meaning of it when I first read it, but maybe you want to share some of the initial impressions and if you got excited about it as I did.
Well, Sophie and I were discussing it a little bit, and I told her every time I read this poem, I seem to get a little bit more insight into it. Like you said, the first time I read it, you know, it was kind of I got a superficial meaning from it the first time I read it, but the more I read it, I guess the more I self-reflected into it and saw different things coming out. Whether he even intended it, I don't know, but it's one of those poems that you don't want to read just once. You want to read it a few times. That's what I would add to it.
What's your experience been with the poem, Sophie?
Actually, I liked it very much the first time I read it, and because I could relate to some emotions that are expressed in this poem, especially, and I'm going to talk about this later, this idea of the tyranny of time and how sometimes daily reality can be hard to cope with.
Well, you know, I think it's a wonderful thing that you're hinting at there. I would have to say that I haven't spent a lot of time with this poem since I did this. I'll tip our hand a little bit. In my working with Bob on Jean-Paul Sartre's plays and working with Sophie and Bob on the works of Charles Baudelaire, it came to my attention that Sartre actually wrote a psychoanalytical text about Charles Baudelaire, the poet, as a person. And what's really interesting to me is I've gone and investigated other poems of Baudelaire's now with this projection that Sartre puts on Baudelaire. I am seeing his poetry in brand new lights. And so I've prepared a little bit of an audio essay to get us going here. I think what will likely happen since I've read that book by Sartre is that maybe I'll be able to see some things now that I didn't see when I originally composed this. And I think kind of the structure that we're going to go with today, I'm going to take about 3 minutes to read that. And then I want Bob and Sophie to share all their thoughts as well, either to respond to this or totally go in different angles. And hopefully that will give way to a really robust and flourishing discussion. So everyone has heard the poem now, and I'm just going to read what I've prepared in my summary and analysis, and I'll just do that. And then I'll let Bob and Sophie kind of drive most of the conversation after that. So the prose poem begins with feelings of regret, and then we begin to witness his transition to a phantasmagorical state. The furniture becomes elongated and possesses a plant-like vitality. The tapestries are interesting, and there are no artistic abominations upon the wall. Everything is dreamy. Compared with his euphoric state, waking life, with its positive art, is actually quite ugly. Everything is beautiful or is communicating beauty in this altered state. It is hard to resist the conclusion that we aren't getting the narration of someone who is gradually letting a drug overtake his consciousness. The question is, what kind of drug is our narrator indulging in? It would appear to be some variant of opium or a synthesis of opium with something else. I'll try to lay out how I got to that conclusion. To begin, throughout the poem, there is an emphasis on a sweet and perfume-like smell. A little bit of research on some nefarious forums relayed to me that burnt opium smells like flowers on fire or a hot perfume. This would obviously be congruent with the title of that other book of poetry, Fleurs du Mal. Why else might we think that our narrator is high on an opiate in this poem? The woman he encounters, we'll revisit her, is wearing muslin fabric. Muslin is a light cotton fabric that comes from Mesopotamia, actually named after Mosul, Iraq. Muslin comes from other areas like Bangladesh. And what are a lot of these areas known for as well? Well, poppy fields. Again, I think this is a reference to the opium-induced state. Finally, after he comes down and realizes his desolate situation, he takes solace in his old friend, the phial of laudanum. I believe that is powdered opium. So the two chambers don't appear to be two physical places, but two states of consciousness, one brought on by opium. It should be noted, in addition to everything being beautiful in his drug-induced state, there is a timelessness or a warped sense of time. It's important to keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go back to the woman in muslin and try to figure out who she is. The woman in muslin seems to match the painting Manet made, Baudelaire's Mistress Reclining. Apparently, and you can find this on Wikipedia, the image. Apparently, this is the only woman Baudelaire really loved. Her name was Jeanne Duval. So I guess that solves this mystery. She rules his dreams, and through drugs, he is able to discern her beautiful image again. It should be noted that he more explicitly references her in other poems. So now it's time for the come down. There's a knock at the door that awakens him to real life and perhaps the real chamber or the second chamber. All the magic vanishes, and he acknowledges the squalid situation he is in. What's most fascinating here is the reintroduction of time and how he speaks of it. He is back under the control of the ancient demon that is time, and in time, all sorts of psychological afflictions occur, like memories, regrets, and twittering nerves. What I think he might be trying to do here is equate the devil with time, with this temporal world. And these psychological conditions are the devil's temptations and torturing afflictions. In the Bible, Satan is referred to by Jesus as the prince of this world. Jesus says in John 12:31 through 32, now is the judgment of the world, now will the prince of the world be cast out. And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all things to myself. Now he said this signifying by what death he wants to die. And maybe one more, John 14:30 through 31. I will no longer speak much with you, for the prince of the world is coming, and in me he has nothing. But he comes that the world may know that I love the Father, and that I do as the Father has commended me. If we were in any doubt that to exist in time is to be in the devil's pit, Baudelaire makes reference to Poe's poem, The Pit and the Pendulum, or short story, I should say. Baudelaire labored at translating Poe's work. When describing the ticking of seconds as a pendulum, this is why time yells out and damns us as slaves in the last line. Interestingly enough, Baudelaire doesn't think that there is anything about life as it is that proclaims the good news, hinting that if the good news is to be found, it must be brought from without. What's also interesting is that Baudelaire seems to be using opium as a way to escape the control of Satan. Drugs are a sort of way to commune with the beautiful and escape the pit, though we can see it as an unsustainable way to conquer the prince of this world. Okay, that's my analysis of the poem. I do have some things that I think maybe influence Sartre's No Exit, but I think that'll come up in conversation. So I'm going to dial me back a little bit and let Bob and Sophie run the show. Tell me if they thought my analysis was a good analysis, if it was wrong, if they interpreted it radically differently. And this is the wonderful thing about poetry, is that there aren't infinite interpretations of poems, but there are multiple, and these things can go in different directions, and our poets can speak indirectly, which leads to different subjective experiences of the piece of art. So, Sophie, Bob, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to let Sophie start here and give her analysis, and then we can discuss it a little bit. Is that okay, Sophie?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, so I'll let you go now.
I agree with Luke's analysis. I thought it was very interesting, and I learned a lot of things. As far as I'm concerned, I did not focus on the same things. What this poem really made me think about is how we tend to want to escape the daily reality, because, well, in this poem, the narrator is probably using drugs in order to escape reality, but there can be other ways. And as far as I'm concerned, I tend to daydream a lot, and I could spend hours daydreaming, and when sometimes someone, it could be my parents, it could be some constraints that I have in my life, an appointment, or the phone ringing, and then I'm awakened to the reality, and I can't be in my daydream anymore. And this poem made me think of that. You are daydreaming. You are in your world where you have control over everything. Everything is the way you want. You are free. And then someone arrive and destroy everything. And time reappear. And for me, I'm someone who hates having to hurry. I love to take my time. And I think Baudelaire was the same. I think from what I read about him, I think he liked to take his time. He liked to appreciate life, to be free, and he didn't want to have constraints. Unfortunately, in real life, you have constraints. You have, for instance, you have to work in order to earn a living. So when you work, especially in a company, you will have a lot of constraints. And Baudelaire, from what I learned about him, he had money issues because he was not allowed to use his money because he had faced a trial or something when he was young because he was too spendthrift, and his own mother asked for it, and he was not allowed to use his money the way he wanted to. So he had to earn money, and so he was not as free as he would want to be. And also in the poem, you can see there are, in the second part of the poem, which is the daily reality, in which there is time. Time is the king of this daily reality. You can see that there are other people who are making his life hard. So there are different characters, and for instance, there is the usher, the concubine, and the errand boy.
Right.
And you can see that he is annoyed by these people. And more seriously, sometimes daily life can be very tiring. Sometimes it's just too much. You are too tired. You can't stand this anymore. So you will take refuge in something. Maybe it could be daydreaming, or maybe you will need to use something in order to be able to escape. For instance, drugs, but it could be something else. It could be a passion, or it could be other addictive stuff. And the more you are dissatisfied with your daily life, the more you will want to escape. And I think it's more it's today, and maybe Baudelaire started to see this because of industrial revolution, that the time, the pace of living changed. Everything is faster, and today I think it's more than ever. If you work in a company, they are always going to they want to control time as much as they can, and they are going to ask employees to plan their tasks, and to after they work, they produce something, or they do their work. They will have to do reporting to write how long they spent on each task. So time is really becoming a dictator.
Yes.
And people are becoming more and more slaves. Or they can think as if they were slaves, and as if their life was not theirs anymore, as if they had no control, and they can have this fear that their life is going to pass, and they won't realize it. They will be old, and they won't realize that time has passed. And for me, and I think for a lot of people, this is something very dreadful.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Sophie. I think both you and I latched on to the final line of the poem for that reason, right? Both you and I really enjoyed. Yes, time. Yes, time reigns. Time has regained his brutal mastery, and he goads me as though I were a steer, with his double goad. Woe, thou fool! Sweat then, thou slave! Live on, thou damned.
I love this sentence.
Yes.
I could say this every day.
Yeah. So, Sophie, did you want to say anything more before Bob weighed in on some of the themes that he wanted to eliminate?
I'm going to check, but I think I said my message is was said. Yes, I think I said what I had to say.
Well, if we should say something and it should remind you of something, just jump in, okay, and say it. So we're used to interrupting each other, Luke and I. So we're used.
Well, I want to thank Sophie for her analysis. I love the different aspects of the poem that she focused on. I think
yes,
the fact that Sophie was to demonstrate that there are more alternatives than just getting one hopped up on some sort of chemically induced ecstasy, that imagination can have that similar sort of role within our life, is a great thing to consider. And I in my summary, I sort of blew past that, and I think it was important for Sophie to slow it down and dwell on that some more. Also to dwell on just how this, I'm no anti-capitalist, I'm no communist or anything like that, but I definitely understand what Sophie is talking about how the gears of that capitalist machine can make it feel like we're not in control of our lives and be alienated from the labor that we make. And I'm really glad and very thankful that she took the time to develop that, because obviously I'm trying to create very meaningful work for myself by creating this platform. So I thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention, Sophie.
Yes, thank you. While Sophie was giving her analysis, I was trying to take a couple of notes here to respond to it, because I see the same thing in each of you. I certainly agree with both of you. One of the characteristics of poetry, and I'm unfamiliar with poetry. I'm kind of the newcomer here with the poetry. So I read it quickly. I try to get an idea. Kind of the way I like to describe it is it's like looking through a telescope. I try to see the whole thing at one time. But then in the analysis, like philosophy, then I go in and I take it line by line and then word by word. And I try to see what's going on here in the and I don't want to say the mechanics, but what's going on underneath all of this? What's he trying to tell me? And as having written myself, every word I write, I choose carefully. And I think, and certainly a poet is going to do that. A poet is going to make sure every single word he picks says exactly what he wants to. So I'm going in with that premise as I read the poetry. So I may have gone into a little bit more detailed study, but then hopefully I stepped back and looked through the telescope at the end. So I try to use both those mechanisms, the telescope and the microscope, and see what I can come up with.
I want to bracket something here, Bob, that I hope that we bring up in our discussion of the poem, is the issue of translation on this issue that you're talking about and what it means to carefully choose a word. But so I'm just going to bracket that along with the Sartre discussion. So
okay. One thing Sophie mentioned was I didn't really think about here was the family issue of Baudelaire. And that really, later on, Luke and I are going to do an analysis by Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, of Baudelaire, and that's probably going to be very interesting. But it brings out the family life and what may have been his background and his influences as to why he is in this particular situation here. I don't think that this is a fictional poem. I don't think that Baudelaire is sitting back saying, oh, I wonder what it would be like to be in this kind of a situation. I think he's writing as a self-revelation, perhaps even a catharsis or a confession. I see his poetry in that he uses the words that he uses, as I'm going to show in the end of my analysis, are contrasting. He contrasts his state of euphoria with his state of reality, and he uses very similar descriptions. I shouldn't say similar descriptions, but the context of his descriptions are very similar, which create a beautiful contrast as to how he sees life while he's under this euphoric idea and how he sees life in his reality. And what that told me is that addictions in general, and this is why I agree with the both of you, addictions in general, no matter what they are not just some momentary entertainment that we go down, but they actually become a means by which we see the world. And I think that's the danger of addictions. So to get a little bit more into the details here, he uses terms. Well, let's see. He opens the poem with the sense that he's already experiencing some kind of a delusion caused by his addiction, which I think he reveals, as Luke does, that is some kind of a mind-altering drug. And although usually when we think and read poetry like this, we think of some kind of mind-altering experience, the fact remains that all addictions, including behavioral addictions, such as the addiction of power, the addiction of games, sports, job, even sexual addictions. They can bring about a sense of euphoria that are tailored to our own individual needs of escape. And it distorts our reality with this illusion that we get into. Now, we may think that when we're done with that illusion, that we step away from it, and now we go back to our reality. But I think this poem is going to show us that that's not really what happens. I think that the addiction leaves remnants of itself in the way we see life. So let me continue on down here. He talked about the idol that he sees, the ruler of my dreams. And Luke mentioned this as this particular woman, I believe. And it very well may be true, that's who he had in mind. But I saw something else in my reading of it, that he uses the word idol. He chooses that word idol. And we know idol is a false god. So in that, I'm kind of projecting my ideas that he's seeing here, whatever this is, this dominates his life. This has become his God, his religion, the source of his addiction, perhaps. Perhaps it was his girlfriend, the woman of his dreams, or perhaps it was the opium or opiate itself. He says, why is she here? Who has brought her? What magical power has installed her upon this throne of delight and reverie? Placing this thing on a throne, in other words, gives it power, ultimate power, influence over his life. And then he kind of says, what matter? She's there and I recognize her. So this is obviously an experience of his senses. He uses his senses to tell his story. The sensations can easily take over our intellectual and spiritual senses, even though we know that they're false and short-lived. He seems to know what's happening in his poem. He knows he's under these delusions, but yet he, in the existential way, he chooses to be there. He would rather be there than where he was. This gives us a moment of self-indulgence in which we want to deny and escape our real lives. He talks about the eyes as he looks into the eyes whose flame pierces the twilight. The subtle and terrible mirrors that I recognize by the horrifying malice. They attract, they dominate, they devour the sight of whomsoever is impudent enough to look at them. And then he calls them black stars.
Yeah.
To me, this is painting a picture here of a black star. I kind of picked up on that. And I thought, what is a black star?
Yeah.
A star is usually twinkling and bright. So he's speaking this as they're capable of removing the light, a darkness. He knows that he's looking into the abyss that has no compassion, no feelings. Black eyes tends to be lizard-like. no passion, no feeling. There's nothing there, right? But yet he's going in with this knowledge. I see kind of an existential layer here also. There's no beginning to this poem and really no end to it. It's just a piece of time that he's telling us of his life. And that tends to be what I've seen in some of the existential plays and short stories that I've read and seen, is that that's what they are. They're just a piece of life, and they don't really mean anything in the overall picture of his life. It's just a moment of his life that he sees, and it's up to us to try to draw out, what does this mean to me in my life?
I love the fact that you picked up on the black stars thing. I thought it was just kind of a neat description, but I guess a black star would be like a black hole or something, right? Isn't a black hole like a collapsed star and then it sucks out all the light?
It is, yeah. I don't know if he was aware of black holes at his time.
Yeah.
But anyway, but I do see this certainly. I thought about that as well, that there's certainly that idea that it's something that just sucks everything out of him. So he's constantly aware in this poem, such a different life, or even a transcendent experience that is something different than he's accustomed to in his real world. He knows that this is an idle euphemism for God. He knows very well the potential penalty that he's paying for this pleasure. But this pleasure isn't something that life can offer him in his real world. So this man is truly an aesthete in the worst possible manner, because he's a victim of pleasure of escape. So in the existential world of Kierkegaard, we read about aesthetes all the time, people who just are in the world for the pleasure that they can get out of it. But here, he's a victim of that pleasure. He's not necessarily getting something out of it without paying a whole lot for this pleasure. And then he talks about what Sophie was talking about. My dreamlike state has been broken by some kind of a shock, this spectre, he calls it, or a spirit or a ghost. The first term he uses, I thought was interesting. He said, it's an usher who comes in to torture me in the name of the law. I'm wondering here, and I'll bounce this off you guys, do you think he's speaking about the guilt that he has, perhaps his Catholic guilt, that he knows what he's doing is sinful, and maybe it's guilt that's knocking on his door, that's bringing him back to his reality? Does that reflect with you at all, either one of you, to see?
I can say a little bit about it. I think it's plausible. Sophie, do you want to go first, or I can say
no, maybe it has to do with his Catholic faith, and maybe also he felt some guilt in relation to his parents, his family, because he was not the boy, the man they wanted him to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think Bob's right to pick up on those religious themes throughout all of Baudelaire's work. It seems like though he's not acknowledging the possibility of Jesus Christ as an escape from this tyrannical dimension of time, he very much acknowledges that there are entities that are outside of him that exercise some sort of control. If he's going to posit the belief in some kind of satanic figure and I guess some sort of God, he seems to be stuck in some sort of religious view without Jesus. So it would make sense if some sort of old Catholic guilt or old sort of religious guilt were to come back haunting him or something like that. I don't know quite how to describe his religious position, because he seems to believe in things beyond this realm, but he's not willing to take the thing that would truly allow him to have escape from this world. So I don't know if you have a name for that. Someone that acknowledges God and the devil, but won't acknowledge Jesus.
Well, yeah, it's just it has a religious conscience and a religious awareness, and he knows that's one door he can open up and go through, but he chooses not to go through that door. Nor does he really want to go to the door of his reality, but he chooses this as a way to escape having to make the choice, I guess is what Sartre would probably say. He doesn't want to make a choice, so he does this instead, but itself is a choice. Okay. So then he hears this hammer, this knocking at the door. He says, all things, but my comment is that all things come to an end. Even our addictive highs eventually wear off. When it happens quickly and abruptly. The realization that it's like a breaking of a spell. I think Sophie alluded to this, like you're there in your own room and you're in your imagination and everything is the way you want. And then all of a sudden the phone rings, and you get that electric shock through your body. It's like my focus, my world is just changing abruptly here. Now I have to go back to the daily life. I was there nice resting in my little state of meditation, and now it's all come back to me again. Then when he starts this change now, and I see the poem in two parts. I see part A is he starts right in with his addiction, his distorted world of not only imagination but of passion, and then all of a sudden he goes to world B, back to where he was. This change is very abrupt, and he says, the real place I live is nothing like my dream place. His real place is a mess. This is a place from which he wants to escape, including his own body. I picked up on this, I think, a little bit, that even his own body is part that he's trying to escape from, which is the responsibility of life. I think this is the traction of addictions it takes us out from facing our real life. My dream state is broken and I abhor the mess in which I live. But he accepts responsibility to a point that it's due to his own laziness. I think he says it here somewhere. He says, "And this perfume of another world whereof I intoxicated myself with the so perfected sensitiveness, alas, its place is taken by an odor of stale tobacco smoke mingled with I know not what nauseating mustiness. Now one breathes the rankness of desolation." There almost seems of his situation. And we get down here a little further. As we come out of our delusion, reality looks even worse than it did before. My senses are heightened in the other direction. It's easy to realize why I wanted to escape in the first place, but my option to escape is still there, and I'm sure that I'll take it in the future. I think addictions are like this, that in my own world, I have a sense of loneliness, and I realize my loneliness. But when I go out in the world and I meet people and I talk, and for just a moment of time, I'm happy, I notice my loneliness a whole lot more when I go back home and I'm alone. And then it's like the silence is deafening. So I see that same thing going on here with Baudelaire. When he's under, the world is pretty unbearable for him. So he escapes. But when he comes back, he finds it even more unbearable because his senses are so heightened. He realizes his failure and his loneliness even more.
I think it's interesting. So one of the thoughts that this is giving me is, Aristophanes played The Clouds, where he ridicules Socrates for being always lost in the clouds. And I suppose digitally, we're all in a cloud right now. I love your all's intellectual company. I speak to you quite frequently, and we make these seminars as much as we possibly can. I can't help but wonder if I know it does for me. I'd like to get your guys' take on it. If this is our opiate of choice in some way, is this our way of escaping the chamber of real life and getting high off intellectualism in some way? And is that why, I don't know, at least for me, why I'm so obsessed with it, is that I've become addicted to being able to commune in a sort of spiritual realm with you all about poetry and philosophy and other ideas. Do you care to weigh in on that?
Yes, I agree. I feel the same.
Yeah, I think there's a component of that, Luke, that I think there's a temptation that we could go in that door. But what we have to do is be strong enough in our faith to be able to make use of this time, and at the same time be strong enough to not become addicted to it. So yes, I think we're presented with that possibility of addiction, but we have to be strong not to go down that door, because if we do, then we'll start to see life distorted.
I will have to say that, and maybe that's something I need to work on personally, but I will have to say that when I'm not doing work like this, I do come back to a distorted reality that is less interesting to me. And I believe myself to be living a pretty happy and good life. But a lot of people say to me that they don't consider me to be a happy person. I've had small children call me a sad man. And I think...
They don't know. They don't know what can make you happy. Only you know.
Yeah. But you know, Sophie, I mean, you know, there is the world that it's not all, you know, there's the world where there are loved ones, right? And you know, people in your life who want to see who can't relate on this level that the three of us are relating in. They want some other sort of visible confirmation of your happiness, you know?
Yes, I think it makes me, it annoys me a lot when people want to give me advice and they think some things will be good for me, but I know that they wouldn't, because I know myself, and I hate it when people really try to give me advice of what would make them happy, but I know it wouldn't make me happy.
Yeah, I'm wrestling. I think you and I are both wrestling with that right now. I'm definitely experiencing a little bit of that in my own personal life too. Bob, I'm sorry, I took it to the personal. I know you have some more.
Oh, no, I'm so glad that you actually confirmed my analysis by doing that. So I'm not going to say anything negative about that. I'm glad that you see that. And I'm glad I see that as well in my own life. Then we get down to, I think, the thing that you both noticed about time. Time certainly was a factor here. And he uses time to express his situation. So time is an important element for the addict. Time seems to disappear for him when he's under this euphoric idea. He even says that when I read it the last time, you'll pick up on it. Time disappears for him when he's in this state of addiction, because time is what he's trying to escape from. When one is not experiencing his delusion, he's experiencing time as something painful. I think we've all been there, and we're all kind of expressing that. That for me, loneliness, you can feel time, the minutes are dropping like a pendulum, like he says. It's a slow, methodic drop. Every minute I feel it. But when I'm out with other people, time goes by so quickly. It disappears, right? But when you're alone, it doesn't disappear. You hear it, you feel it. You can sense it. You can almost taste it. When one is in pain, in time, one can feel it pass so slowly. In such a state, one is well aware of the slavery to this addiction, which is how he kind of ends his poem, as being a slave. So I have a little chart that I made to give part of the analysis, just to show how he has this part A and part B here. So under the addiction, he gives us this line. He says, the shape of the furniture is elongated, low, and languishing. But in reality, he says, here is my senseless furniture, dusty and tattered, the dirty fireplace without a name or an ember. Then under the addiction, he says, the abundant muslin flows before the windows and the couch and spreads out in snowy cascades. But in reality, the sad windows where the raindrops have traced runnels in the dust. He talks about, under the addiction, the delicious obscurity of music. But now in reality, a heavy and terrible knocking reverberates upon the door, and as in a hellish dream, it seems to me as though I had received a blow from a medic. Under the addiction, he says, an infinitesimal odor of the most exquisite choice, mingled with a floating humidity, swims in the atmosphere. But under his addiction, its place is taken by an odor of stale tobacco smoke, mingled with I know not what nauseating mustiness. And finally, under the addiction, he says, minutes are no more, seconds are no more. Time has vanished and eternity reigns in an eternity of delight. And then in the real world, yes, time has reappeared. I assure you that the seconds are strongly and solemnly accentuated now, and each as it drips from the pendulum. Yes, time reigns. Time has regained his brutal mastery. I just kind of picked up on that contrast and thought that was worth bringing out in our discussion.
I think when we have a more developed version of the website, I will be able to list and show people that chart in the module that we're creating right now. So I think that will be incredibly helpful. So I have like a million questions, discussion directions that we can go in. But I'm also, I'm happy to defer to Sophie. Would you like to is there a subject that you would like to bring up first, Sophie?
Sorry, I didn't really understand the question.
Oh, I have some questions and some discussion topics that we can use to have a conversation. But I can defer to you if you have one that's more pressing to you, that's more of a priority to you, that you want to bring up first.
No, you can say what you wanted to say.
Okay. So, Bob, there's so many things here. I guess maybe since we're just on the subject of time, and because I emphasized it a little bit more in my analysis than you and Sophie did in yours, where I closely drew time as being the presence of Satan. And then I elaborated upon that as being, I quoted those passages from the Bible where Jesus acknowledges Satan as the prince of this world, and Baudelaire seems to be acknowledging that like Satan is this ancient demonic force that rules this realm. I love learning from you, Bob, because you have the theological background. How are we to think of this talk of Satan as the prince of this world? What does that mean?
Well, prince of the world, yeah, it means the ruler of this world. And this world, I think we have to take it as a world that there's like two worlds: the world with God, the world without God. The world in which we have a relationship with God when He is our ruler, our King. And that's, again, Jesus uses the contrasting terms, ruler, prince, darkness, and so forth, because either God is our ruler or the devil is our ruler. And the devil, actually, the word means deceiver. And so there are so many means of deception in the world that we can be drawn into, whether we believe in a literal devil or whether we believe in a metaphorical devil. It really comes down to the idea that it focuses on the same thing. We're taken away from the reality with God by a reality without God. And without God, there needs to be a substitute. And so the devil is filled with all kinds of substitutes. He's got just a whole stockpile of different things that he can use, which I read off a few of them: power, finance, love, sex, control, addictions of all sorts. He's got a plethora on his shelf of where he can draw us away, distract us from focusing on the reality with God.
I think the thing that I struggled with this is that, you know, I have a very sort of childlike understanding of theology, and I always kind of thought, well, like, Satan ruled in hell, and this plane, it's very strange to me to think that this plane is somehow abandoned to that prince of darkness. Sorry. So I just like, theologically, I think that was sort of a little bit troubling for me.
What it makes me think is when Jesus talked about his disciple, he said that they were not from the world, that there is maybe I should find the reference in the Bible, but he says that his disciples are not from the world, and that's why the world hates them. And I think it means that their values are not the same than the values of the world, which makes you successful in this world, which allow you to have power and all these idols that Satan maybe could tempt to want to have. And so there are some people who are very well adjusted to this world, the world of where there is the values are power, money, etc. And there is the disciples. They are seen as naive or maybe unrealistic by these people, and so they are not from this world, but they are from the world, maybe the kingdom of heaven.
No, I think that's a wonderful way to say it. I think my only concern, and Sophie, I thank you very much for pointing that out. I think my only concern is our world fundamentally degenerate? Like, is everything within this world not? I guess my only concern about it is it seems like that what's God's claim on this world, on this plane that we live in, if it's given over to a ruler.
I think. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I think God is acting in this world through the Holy Spirit and through people who are loving others, and He's acting through people to counterbalance this darkness and to build positive things. But that's my opinion. I think there is actually it's a fight finally between good and evil in the world.
Yeah, that's kind of that's sort of view that I'm gravitating towards lately. Bob, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, when we think also about the temptations in the world, just think about the temptations of Christ, the things that the devil used to tempt Christ. He used power, but he also used simple things that we wouldn't think of normally as temptations. He used food, turn these rocks into bread. You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be drugs or something complicated. Everyday life, if you want to be tempted and if you want to go down that road, there's a temptation for us. It could be, you know, food in the sense of overeating, I guess you might say. It could be something simple before us. So, Luke, the idea is that without God, we're without protection. It is the scripture says, God is my shield. And without the shield, you're there for Satan's arrows, is the rest of the scripture. So we have to we don't have to use God as our shield.
Well, I think it's also important to point out that Jesus refers to Satan as the prince. And as far as hierarchies go, I mean, the prince is not the ultimate ruler, right? I mean,
good point. Good point.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't mean that just because Satan may be the prince of this realm of temporality doesn't mean that he has the final say.
Right.
In all.
So he has limited power. He has power, but it's limited by the king.
Yeah. One of the other things that I was going to bring up, and I think this is interesting, and I love that. This is what I love about having Sophie be a part of this, is that Bob and I read a translation of this poem, and there are, I think, several translations of this poem. It's just that we used a translation that is in the public domain, so we're kind of forced by practicality to do that. But Sophie has an advantage over Bob and I. Sophie can read right into the mind of Baudelaire in a way that Bob and I can't, and presumably in a way that even the translator can't. And I can't help, I get envious of Sophie because she gets to experience Baudelaire in a way that we can't.
Right.
And what's really interesting is that it's just a point to point out is that there's a hierarchy of translators. I'm not really sure. I don't even know who translated our version. I know it's on public domain poetry.com, so people can check it out. But presumably, the reason why there are multiple translations of Baudelaire's work is because some interpreters of his work think that they could do it better. And then there's going to be someone else who comes along and thinks they can do it better. And there are like small choices, right? So if in a poem Baudelaire uses a word in French that could have two meanings in English, it could mean Satan, it could mean Lucifer, it could mean this or that, right? Or like Fleurs de Mal itself, right? Like mal could mean bad or evil, which has a very different connotation in English. I guess the point I just want to point out is the difficulty of doing these analyses all the time in English when we're translating from another language. And just how I'm jealous of Sophie. That's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Well, that makes two of us. And it sounds so much better when you read it in French.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it in English, and that's going to sound like a butcher compared to a surgeon.
Sophie, what's really wonderful about what we're doing here is I think we're popularizing Baudelaire in the English language. I don't get the sense. Bob, had you ever encountered Charles Baudelaire in your entire life? I mean,
actually, I have a teacher. I think she's a professor of literature, and she's not really that familiar with Baudelaire either. Because I asked her, she's heard of him, but she's really not familiar with his work. So I guess he's just not as famous out here, right?
Yeah. So Sophie, does this poem, is this like a very popular poem in France, or did I choose an obscure one? What's the reception?
Baudelaire is very popular, but not this poem. There were very few analyses of this poem, even in French. But Baudelaire himself is very popular. There are even pop songs which were written, made out of Baudelaire's poems. But this poem in particular, I don't think it's very popular. I struggled to find an analysis of this poem, and actually I didn't find any.
Well, I guess we've made breakthroughs in both languages. Yes. Yeah, so I guess it's good to hear. I hope we're not too off base. So I'm kind of curious about. Are you that familiar with Edgar Allan Poe in France? Because he's from where I'm in Virginia right now, and he went to the University of Virginia. He went to, and I actually a couple months ago I went and saw his old dorm room at the college, and Baudelaire felt like Edgar Allan Poe was a kindred spirit of his, hence the reference to the pendulum, and all the time he spent laboriously translating his works. Do you all study Edgar Allan Poe in France at all? Was he successful at popularizing Edgar Allan Poe in France?
I think his name is well known, but I didn't learn about him at school.
Yeah, so we learn a lot about Poe at school when we grow up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially me, because he's got that connection to Virginia history. Interestingly enough, if people in France are listening, we have a football team here, an American football team called the Baltimore Ravens. They won a Super Bowl a couple years ago. They've won 2 Super Bowls, actually. I don't know if people in France watch American football, but the Ravens is it's crazy. They are a sports team here in this country that actually got their name from one of Edgar Allan Poe's poems. It's called The Raven, and that's why they are the Baltimore Ravens. So I don't know. That'd be almost like that'd be interesting if there was like a soccer team in France called the Double Chamber after Baudelaire, or the Fleurs du Mal are playing this weekend or something like that. You know, Spleen.
I don't know. I don't watch football. I'm not the best person to talk about.
Well, I thought that was interesting. What were you going to say, Bob?
Well, after Sophie made the comment about musicians doing songs on Baudelaire, I'm just wondering, since you're a musician, if this has perhaps inspired you to maybe write a song based upon this poem.
You mean Sophie or me? Because I think both Sophie and I do music.
Oh, well, either one of you have either one of you been motivated now after we've gone over this poem? Has it inspired you to think that, maybe I could write a song about this here? What do you think?
I'll let Sophie take it first. What do you think, Sophie?
I'm just actually I'm not writing songs. I'm just it's just I'm just an amateur. I'm not that's good. I haven't wrote songs.
So I'm always going to be the first one, right, Sophie?
Oh, maybe. I want to write songs, but I never. I only wrote one song for my mom, but that's all. But I would like to.
I would say for me, I've sort of abandoned music to concentrate entirely on building Noetic, but what the recitations of poems are doing are allowing me to do a little bit what Sophie does with music, where she covers other people's songs. And it's giving me the confidence. I was always behind the scenes as a drummer and a music producer. And the more I get confident speaking into a microphone and doing these performances of Baudelaire's poetry or other individuals, it's making me think, you know what, I'm essentially singing a song. Maybe I could do this. Like maybe when I retire or something like that, I could go. Maybe I could be a front man after spending all this time on poetry. I could finally have enough courage to lead a project. From the front.
We are going to sing a Baudelaire poem together.
Yes. Well, we should give it a try. We should give it a try.
In harmony. We could do 3-part harmony. There you go.
Yeah. Bob's a bit of a musician himself. So I imagine we could all 3 do it.
It will be great.
Yeah. It's giving me some ideas. We can do something. The only other discussion topic that I really wanted to bring up was Bob and Sophie. Sophie, have you read Sartre's No Exit? I presume your Sartre kind of permeates everything over there in France, kind of like Baudelaire. I don't know how much of an acquaintance you have with him, but it seemed like to me that Sartre's No Exit may have taken some cues from Baudelaire. Specifically, let me see here. specifically in the emphasis that Baudelaire places on the psychological as a means of torture. We're talking about the memories and the twittering nerves of this realm, and how in No Exit, there were no torturers there. They each tortured each other with their own different psychological tics and idiosyncrasies. I thought it was interesting that Baudelaire was sort of trapped in this room, and that seemed to be kind of reminiscent of the room that they were trapped in No Exit, with the abominable art on the wall that Garcon remarks about. And the kind of the temperature, it's just stuffy enough to drive people insane, but not like on fire like we imagine sort of hell as it is conventionally conceived. I couldn't help but wonder, since Sartre was so invested in Baudelaire's poetry, that he may have taken some inspiration for No Exit from maybe even this very poem. I didn't know if, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure somebody has written about this at length, but I don't know if that jumped out to any of you guys.
No, I think that's really great that you see that. I didn't really see that. So I think you're bringing something new to me. That I think that's something I could, when I reread the poem, I can probably see more of that than what I saw before. So that's very interesting. It might have been an influence, but I'm not sure it was a conscious influence through Sartre. It might have been something that subtly influenced him as he wrote as well, right?
Yeah. Totally possible. I think the biggest thing was when we talked about positive art being an abomination. And do you remember Garcon saying that?
Yes.
And I was just like, what are the chances here?
Yeah.
Look at an art object and call it an abomination. I was like, that's a little statistically improbable. But Sophie, I don't know. Have you read No Exit, or I'm sure it's like standard reading in
yeah, but no, I don't. I only read extracts of it, but not entirely. But I watched your video.
Oh.
Apologies, I had slept like 1 hour the night before doing that.
No, it was very interesting. I liked it very much.
Good. All right, well, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. Unless you guys have anything else, I think maybe we should let Bob do a recitation to close things out. Kind of put the poem back together.
Right, yeah. I'd be glad to do that. I don't have anything else to offer. So, and you're okay now, Sophie? We're ready to go?
Okay.
Okay. A chamber that is like a reverie, a chamber truly spiritual, where the stagnant atmosphere is highly touched with rose and blue. There the soul bathes itself in indolence made odorous with regret and desire. There is some sense of the twilight, of things tinged with blue and rose, a dream of delight during an eclipse. The shape of the furniture is elongated, low, languishing. One would think it endowed with the somnambulistic vitality of plants and minerals. The tapestries speak an inarticulate language, like the flowers, the skies, and dropping suns. There are no artistic abominations upon the walls. Compared with the pure dream, with an impression unanalyzed, definite art, positive art, is a blasphemy. Here all has the sufficing lucidity and the delicious obscurity of music, an infinitesimal odor of the most exquisite choice, mingled with a floating humidity, swims in the atmosphere, where the drowsing spirit is lulled by the senses one feels in a hothouse. The abundant muslin flows before the windows and the couch and spreads out in snowy cascades. Upon the couch lies the idol, ruler of my dreams. But why is she here? Who has brought her? What magical power has installed her upon this throne of delight and reverie? What matter? She is there, and I recognize her. These indeed are the eyes whose flame pierces the twilight, the subtle and terrible mirrors that I recognize by their horrifying malice. They attract, they dominate, they devour the sight of whomsoever is imprudent enough to look at them. I have often studied them, these black stars that compel curiosity and admiration. To what benevolent demon, then, do I owe being thus surrounded with mystery, with silence, with peace, and sweet odors? O beatitude, the thing we name life, even in its most fortunate amplitude, has nothing in common with the supreme life with which I am now acquainted, which I taste minute by minute, second by second. Not so. Minutes are no more. Seconds are no more. Time has vanished, and eternity reigns, an eternity of delight. A heavy and terrible knocking reverberates upon the door, and as in a hellish dream, it seems to me as though I had received a blow from a medic. Then a specter enters. It is an usher who comes to torture me in the name of the law, an infamous concubine who comes to cry misery and to add the trivialities of her life to the sorrow of mine. Or it may be the errand boy of an editor who comes to implore the remainder of a manuscript. The chamber of paradise, the idol, the ruler of dreams, the self-eyed. As the great Rene said, all this magic has vanished at the brutal knocking of the specter. Horror. I remember. Yes, this kernel, this habitation of eternal weariness is indeed my own. Here is my senseless furniture, dusty and tattered, the dirty fireplace without a name or an ember, the sad windows where the raindrops have traced runnels in the dust, the manuscripts erased and unfinished, the almanac with its sinister days marked off with a pencil. And this perfume of another world whereof I intoxicated myself with a so perfected sensitiveness, alas, its place is taken by an odor of stale tobacco smoke, mingled with I know not what nauseating mustiness. Now one breathes here the rank of desolation. In this narrow world, narrow and yet full of disgust, a single familiar object smiles at me, the phial of laudanum. Old and terrible love, like all loves, alas, fruitful in caresses and treacheries. Yes, time has reappeared. Time regains a monarch now, and with a hideous ancient has returned all his demoniacal following of memories, regrets, tremors, fears, dolors, nightmares, and twittering nerves. I assure you that the seconds are strongly and solemnly accentuated now, and each, as it drips from the pendulum, says, I am life, intolerable, implacable life. There is not a second in mortal life whose mission it is to bear good news, the good news that brings the inexplicable tear to the eye. Yes, time reigns. Time has regained his brutal mastery, and he goads me as though I were a steer, with his double goad. Woe, thou fool, sweat, then thou slave, live on, thou damned. The end.
Yeah, that was really wonderful, Bob.
Thank you.
I lost myself in it. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Really good. Well, guys, I'm proud of us. I think it was cool. Another successful session. I want to thank you all for helping me understand this poem better, and hopefully we're helping other people
yes.
get interested in Baudelaire, get interested in poetry, get interested in existentialism, get interested in religion. Get interested in theoretical physics. We kind of covered it all today. So.
And Sophie, we're dependent on you to get the word out to the French kingdom out there. We need some more French people getting involved, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you build it, they will come. Yeah. All right, thank you guys. I'll have this.
I don't know. I'm not very popular in France.
I can't believe that. I don't.
We'll turn you into a rock star over here. Okay. All right, guys. I'm gonna end this communication and put it up on the app and website and YouTube and SoundCloud, and all the other places. So be sure to download the Noetic app from your Google Play and App Store on your iPhone. All right. I want to thank our guests again, Sophie Licor and Bob Schut. It's always a pleasure working with you guys. I'm glad to have you as friends. And we'll be back in February as a trio. I think the three of us are going to talk about Sartre's existential psychoanalysis of Baudelaire. And we'll probably do more stuff. And, Sophie, we love having you on. So, we'll think of some other opportunities if you want to keep joining us. Okay. So,
thank you.
no problem. Take care. I'll talk to you guys soon. Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Goodbye.